welcome to the Power of Prayer. And as you can see, it's Teresa Gross. I had the opportunity, and I so thank you, Gloria Fountain, for allowing me to be a guest host today. And if you're thinking about Gloria Fountain today, isn't she a marvelous lady? I'm telling you, that woman is on fire for the Lord, working all the time in all kind of ministries. And that's why she asked me, oh, Teresa, could you just come help me out? I'm so busy. So I want to say thank you, Gloria. I appreciate that so much. And I've got my coffee, and so we're going to have just a great program with the Lord. And I hope that if you have someone there that you want to call and say, hey, it's time for Gloria. She's on again. And watch this program. We have a wonderful lady that has a dynamic testimony of how God can take incredible tragedy and make it into something beautiful. It says that he makes beauty for ashes, and he did in her life. And so he can do that for you. And so I hope that as you're watching the program, it will just grasp hold of your spirit, man, and that you can say, if God can work out things for Yvonne, then he can work out things for me. Because you know what? He's a God for everyone. We're his sons, we're his daughters. He has a great plan. He has a destiny, a predetermined plan just for you.
Amen.
And so I know that as you watch this program, the testimony is just a powerful thing of what God can do in a life that is headed one direction, and he turns it, and he restores, and he redeems. So help me welcome our really special guest, Yvonne Jones. Yvonne, wow. It's been a while. On my program, Designed for Destiny, you were on there several years ago. So there's some things that have happened since then. But let's just kind of start with, you were in an abusive situation. You were with a man, and you had a son from a previous marriage.
Yes.
And so kind of just start from there.
Okay. My first husband and I had separated. We had a 5-year-old son together. And my first husband actually was the first man that I'd ever gotten involved with. And so the marriage didn't last but about 8 years. But anyway, when I met this guy, when my first husband and I separated, I had met this guy at Walmart. And I didn't know a lot about, bad people. I was sheltered. I lived a very sheltered life. So I didn't know a lot about bad people. I grew up around good Christian people and good brothers and this, that, and the other. But when I met this guy, he was like a sweep you off your feet kind of guy. And I just didn't realize what I was getting myself into, which is really easy to do if you live a sheltered life and you're not used to being around people. But anyway, I had found myself, before I knew it, compromising my spiritual beliefs with him. He was like one of your wine you, dine you people, a lot with candlelight dinners and roses and this, that, and the other. And like I said, just swept me off my feet. And before I knew it, I was compromising my spiritual beliefs. I had gotten involved with him. And he moved me away from my family, which is what an abuser usually does. They start out by moving you away from your family.
Well, that's kind of their profile.
Yeah. So he moved me away from my family. Me and my son were with him. And then all of a sudden, I found myself, I didn't even realize that I found myself in an abusive situation. I had never even been in a bar since I was like 26. I had never been in a bar, and I was 26 years old. And before I knew it, the abuse started to me, and then it escalated to my son. And before I knew it, a year later, he murdered him. So.
Okay, so the abuse is something, when you're in that situation, you don't really realize.
No.
Because it's so brainwashing.
Yes.
I mean, I've not experienced that, but I know just from reading and what you've told me about. So you're in that abusive situation, and so things are happening to you and to your son.
Yes.
But you realize too late.
Yeah.
And so when your first son, what's his name?
Alan.
Alan was murdered, then you were married to this man at that time?
Yeah, we hadn't been married, but we got married on March the 5th. We had been married 3 days.
Okay, so you
we lived together.
went to court?
Yes.
And so what happened, and what did the judge say?
Well, actually, right after the murder took place, we had the funeral and all of that, and but back then there was not a lot of education on domestic violence. So the DA said he wasn't charging me for what I did. They arrested me as well at the funeral.
Oh, okay.
But not because he said, I'm not arresting you for what you did, but for what you didn't do, which was to act at the time of at the murder. So he said, because of that, I'm going to arrest you as well. But anyway, oh dear God. So anyway, my mind's going blank.
So you got arrested,
Yes.
but you didn't think you were going to get arrested.
No, I never thought I would be arrested. I remember the day at the funeral, my daddy sat there and he said, Yvonne, all I can do is tell the truth, and the truth will set you free. And he asked me what happened. I couldn't even tell Daddy what happened.
You really didn't know what happened.
I
actually.
really didn't realize what had happened at that particular time. That's just how bad off I was mentally. And I really just did not realize and then that particular day when they arrested him, they arrested me as well. And then, I mean, it was just like, from that point on, they decided that they kept me in jail for 2 weeks, and then they released me because they felt like I needed counseling. So they released me, and I underwent counseling, and it was amazing, an amazing thing, because, I mean, it's amazing what the Lord can do in situations like that, because I was just totally just out of it. I didn't realize how much out of it I was. There were so many things that I did not remember had went on, and I even had to undergo hypnosis with my counselor to remember a lot of things from that day. But the Lord, I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen, but for the first 2 years, it was like I was severely depressed. I couldn't remember a lot of things. My nerves were shot. I remember at one point when they let me out of jail, I would have points of, the depression would just get so bad. It would be like it would build up for days. And the Lord only helps us to handle a little bit at a time with things that we go through. And because if our brain tried to grasp everything that we're going through, we would not be able to handle it. And He knew I wouldn't be able to handle all of that. So,
but you're at home right now going through this part. They
I'm
let
at
you
home.
out.
They
Okay.
let me out. And actually, they actually charged me with first-degree murder. And they said there was no bond on first-degree murder right at first. So a miracle in that part was the fact that they even gave me a bond.
Wow, you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. So they let me go home because they felt like I needed the counseling. So that's what I did. I went home and I started the counseling. But during the midst of that 2-year period, it was like we had his trial and we had my trial and we had psychiatric evaluations, we had psychological evaluations, testing, and they were determining what my part was going to be. But when I was arrested, the DA said he knew I had nothing to do with what happened, and if I would cooperate with him, he would work with me. Well, his meaning working with me was making sure that, I mean, he thought I could tell him things that I thought that I saw that I didn't see, but I wasn't able to do that. I mean, there was a lot of things that I did not even realize happened to my son until to the trial, when they started showing pictures and things like that. There were so many things that I didn't realize that happened. One thing that I want to bring out is the fact that in situations like that, when you're being brainwashed into things like that, there were so many times that I could see him doing things to my son, but I couldn't. It's like I couldn't act. You can see, but you can't move.
Just paralyzed.
Yeah, you're paralyzed. Your body just simply cannot act to do anything about it. And but during that first 2 years, I was about to have a nervous breakdown. I had like one particular time that suicide crossed my mind. I had another son that was actually his son, and he was 5 weeks old at the time of my son's death. And they took him from me the day after my son was murdered. And so anyway, I had this 5-week-old son, and we were going to visit him. He and my mom and I were going to visit him every 2 weeks at the social services. And on the way there one day, I was just so depressed, and I was like, just let go of the steering wheel and end it all. And here's my mom sitting up here in the other side of the car, and she is unaware of anything that's going on in my mind, but the pain was just so real. I hated myself. I hated him. I hated the town. I hated life, and I just didn't want to live at that particular time. And I prayed and I said, God, I said, I can't deal with this like this. I can't deal with this anymore. And I said, I need you to reach down and touch me. And at that particular time, he did. And that's not the only instance. There was another instance where when you get to the point of talking about when I got out of jail, of the forgiveness part, and it's like, I used to watch Charles Stanley all the time, and Charles Stanley said, you cannot begin to heal until you can forgive. And I knew my son's death was not a reality to me. I couldn't cry. My mom could just cry at the drop of a hat, and I could not cry. So I knew that there had to be a lot of healing going on, and I remember one day my brain just felt so heavy, and I was severely depressed. I was putting dish rags in the cabinet, milk in the cabinet, dish rags in the refrigerator, and I knew I was losing my mind. And I went into the bathroom and I prayed, and my brain felt like it weighed 10,000 pounds. And I said, Lord, I can't be a witness for you. I can't share what people have done, what you've done for me, unless you heal me. And I walked out into my den, and about 5 minutes later, I just felt the hand of God touch me, and I felt that heaviness lift. Now I was still severely depressed, but I did feel the Lord release that. And it was amazing because that day I was supposed to go to my counselor, and she was getting a psychiatrist to give me some antidepressants. And we had to wait a week because my psychiatrist had cancer. So when I went back the next week, she said, Yvonne, you don't need any antidepressants, do you? And I said, no, I don't. I have the only antidepressant I need, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's just a little bit of a deal about what God's done.
In this story, there's so many possibilities of what to talk about, but I want to be able to talk, because you have a book. It's called A Time to Heal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get the book, it's out of print, but she can, if you will, on her information that's on the screen, you contact her and she can get you the ebook.
I can do the ebook.
If you want to
and
read
I'm going to be giving the ebook away for free. My book is out of print right now. Actually, the publisher had some issues with them, but I am wanting to give away the ebook for free because I believe it's about helping people right now.
And there's so many people, women and children that go through such domestic violence and abuse. It's really horrible. But I want to talk about, like, how did the Lord work in your life that you could forgive yourself, and what has He done since then that has restored you to where you are today?
Yeah. So, like I was saying before about the forgiveness issue, I knew that I was never going to be able to heal unless I forgive. And Charles Stanley pointed out so many different things in the forgiveness process. I was listening every morning, and he said, you just have to put people in front of you, pretend that you got them sitting in front of you, and then you just pour your heart and soul out to them. And then you say, but because God's grace has forgiven me, I choose to forgive you. And that's what I did. I took each person one at a time. When I first started doing it, it didn't come easy, and I messed up, and I said, I can't do this. And I felt like it should be some emotion there. Then I went out to my son's grave, and I began to pour my heart out. And I began to take one person at a time, and how I felt like each one had wronged me. And the hardest person to forgive was myself. But one thing that it took me a long time to realize was the forgiveness doesn't come overnight. It takes a long time, and it's a step process. I mean, you have to, by faith, you have to say you forgive them, and you have to let the Lord handle the rest. And that's what He did. It took a lot of years. And after going to prison, I was sentenced to 21 years hard labor.
Wow. I bet you weren't expecting that.
I wasn't. I mean, we went to the trial. We had people praying. Actually, the day that I was supposed to be sentenced, I didn't bring anything with me because, I just knew. I was surprised at the verdict. There was a lot of things that went on that was just not right. But when the verdict came, my whole family was sitting there with me, and he said, I sentence you to 21 years hard labor, and with sentence beginning immediately. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they handcuffed and shackled me right there in front of my parents and everybody and took me away. And I could hear my mom just screaming, she forgot her purse.
Well, the things that happen when you're in those kind of situations.
But it was amazing, and and it's
But
like,
you didn't serve 21 years.
no, I didn't.
Praise the Lord. What happened?
Yeah, I didn't serve 21 years. It seemed like the whole time, and God's grace was so amazing through there. In the first 2 weeks after I had gotten arrested, there were some prison ministers that had came to visit the prison. And when they were there, I went down for prayer and had prayer with them. And actually, the day of my sentencing, and I went back that night, I wasn't expecting anybody in that town to come visit me. But they took me to the jail, and then all of a sudden I've got a visitor. I'm like, who is this coming to see me? And it was the prison minister from the time that I was first arrested, the 2 years before.
Wow.
And she said, when I saw you before, what I seen was a broken and abused woman, and a woman who knew God. And she said, I'm just here to let you know that there are people in this town who love you and support you. And that was just God's way of letting me know, hey, I'm here. I know what you've been through. I'm here, and I'm going to get you through this. And that's where it all began, the things that started. It's like Satan was just, and the DA, it's like he was bound and determined to get me one way or another. It's like every time we had a step forward, the DA would be one step trying to stop us. And when it got time to go for my pardon board hearing, they thought it was going to be good. Everything was going to turn out okay with it. And it's like I was on trial all over again.
And how long had you served when you went back to the before the pardon board?
Let's see, I think I had served about 5 years.
Okay.
5 years. And I went up for the pardon. And I went back and I started claiming the scripture, Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hands of the Lord, like the rivers of water. He turns it whithersoever he will. I knew the only way that I was ever going to get ahead was for God to start changing this DA's heart.
Right.
And because every time I went, he was always one step ahead of me to stop me. So I started every morning and I started praying, and I put his name in the prayer. The DA's heart is in the hands of the Lord, like the rivers of water. He turns it whithersoever he will. And I started praying that prayer, and it come time in April of 2001 that it was time for me to go up for parole. And so my attorney at the time contacted the DA, and I had been praying for him all of this time. And he said, are you planning to stop her? And he said, no, I'm not planning to stop her. He said, in fact, I think it would be a great justice done in order to get her released, and, which was a miracle, because this man never wanted me released. And so he said, can I get that in writing? And he said, yes. And so after 7 years in prison,
Of a 21-year sentence.
yeah, and it's like the Lord just gave me a vision a few days or a few days before I went up before the parole board. And if you're not familiar with a rap sheet, it's something you get while you're in prison. It tells your time and, you know, how many years you got and all that. So anyway, the rap sheet said 2001, and it's like, no, it was, let's see, yeah, May of 2001. I can't remember exactly, but anyway. I just felt like I was going to make it. And we got to the parole board, and I had three people on the parole board, and they all granted me parole, and I got work release, and that was after 7 years. And then I went to the halfway house, and I was there for like five months. And I was released actually the day before my birthday to go home.
Oh, that's
Yep.
sweet of the Lord,
Yep.
wasn't it?
Yep.
God just knows how to do it. He just
He
knows how
does.
to work it out.
He does.
So how long has it been since you were released?
Wow.
2001?
2001.
So 19 years?
Yes, and I just got off of parole in 2015.
You actually got off parole. Wow.
So I've been off of parole since 2015, and that's one of the most important things for people to remember is you live your life by the choices you make, and those choices not only affect you, but they affect your family members. You know, our families suffer right along with us. No matter what we're going through, they suffer right along with us. And my dad has been right there by my side the whole time. He has been my rock, and he's still my rock today. I
So
love
now
him.
your son, that was 5 weeks old when you got arrested, Did you have a relationship with him? Has God
No.
restored that?
My rights were terminated while I was locked up. They took him from me. They would not let my family have him. There's a lot of issues with that. But they terminated my parental rights, and I was not able to have any kind of contact with him until he turned 18 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
So when I knew he was turning 18, I decided to reach out and see if I could find him. I knew pretty much who had him because I knew the adopted parents. So I knew who had him, and I sent her a message, and I told her that I wanted to have a relationship with my son if he was willing to have one. So she said, well, let me talk to him and see. And he said contact him on Facebook, and that's what I did. So he's Army National Guard, and he's been in the military pretty much all this time, and so he and I do have a relationship.
And what's his name?
His name is Jeremy.
Jeremy. See, God is just, I mean, such an awful, tragic
Yes.
circumstance. And we know, like you said, choices we make put us
Yeah.
in situations like that. But God does redeem.
Yes, he does.
And now there are consequences to the
Yeah.
choices, and so
Yeah.
we do have to suffer through that. But that does not take away this Almighty God,
That's right.
does not change how He worked through the parole system
Yeah.
and the pardon to
Yes.
get you 7.5 years when the
7.5
sentence had
years.
said, or rap sheet
21.
had said 21. And so you were just believing the word of the Lord,
Yes.
and He was doing the thing in your heart
Mm-hmm.
and working on the people outside of what was
Outside.
going on.
Yeah.
And it all connected at the right
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And such a beautiful, beautiful story about your son that you've restored that relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just so wonderful.
Yeah.
So what would you tell people that are walking through something that is abusive to help them? Maybe they need to get out of the situation. What are some things they might could do
Yeah.
to do that?
Well, one of the first things you definitely need to do is tell somebody. I did not tell anybody what was going on in my situation. And although his family knew what was going on because they knew the type of person he was, my family had no idea. He had separated me from my family. So that's the first thing you do is you tell somebody. And then you make sure you get out of there. I don't care what you have to do, just get out. Because, you know, so many times we think people are going to change. Well, God is the only person who can change a heart. And that heart has to be willing to change. And you can't change people. And so that's the main thing. There's churches, there's people all around that will help you. I will help you. You know, your most important thing to do is just get out. Tell somebody and get out. Go to a nearest shelter. Go somewhere, but just get out.
I think the one thing from your telling your story was you were so your brain had been so brainwashed,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there are people out there you don't even realize how they're controlling you so
Yeah.
badly.
Yeah.
And you know, you tell yourself, "Oh, it'll get better,"
Yeah.
and they tell you every time, "Oh, I promise I'll never do it again."
Yep.
But they do. And you had found out he had done this to somebody else.
Yep. When I was arrested, the day I was arrested, on the way to the jail, they said, "Did you know he had been arrested for wife abuse? Did you know he had been arrested for child abuse? Did you know he had been suspected of killing 2 other kids other than yours?" And I had no idea this. And that's another important point. Make sure you get to know people. You know, there are so many wolves in sheep's clothing. I mean, there are so many deceitful people out there. And one of the things that these abusive guys do is they, like I said, they whine you, they dine you, they sweep you off your feet. They start by telling you you're beautiful, and they make you feel like you are the most precious person in the world. But all of a sudden, when I got there, I found out to be a whole different story.
And I think they're so cunning and so deceptive. They know the type of person
To look for.
to pursue, to look for, someone
do.
that already feels a little broken and a little
Yeah.
beaten.
Yep.
And so they just gravitate towards
They
that kind of
gravitate.
personality.
Yes, they do.
And but we don't have to stay there. We don't
No.
have to live that kind of life. You know, if you could, you would turn back the clock and do
Yes.
everything, but we
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And still, God loves you. God has not forgotten
Yes.
you. God
No.
has not spanked you or, you know, oh, you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
you know He's redeemed you, and
That's
just the
right.
fact that you've walked through that forgiveness, Yvonne, for
Yeah.
yourself.
Exactly.
I would just think that would be one of the most
Yeah.
hard things to
Yeah.
do
When I
because
went,
your child was murdered.
that's right. And I had a lot of people who used to ask me, "How can you forgive? How can you forgive this guy? He murdered your son." I said, "Well, first of all, it's not my choice. God forgives me, and I can't not forgive. And forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about you. Because this is a way that Charles Stanley put it, as long as you have that unforgiveness and that bitterness in your heart, then you have become that person's prisoner. And my thought was, I can't be his prisoner
Right.
anymore. So I have to forgive. And even though at that gravesite that day, I was the hardest person to forgive. I was the hardest person to say the words. And I didn't even actually forgive myself till it was like several years after I'd gone to prison. And I had a lady at that particular time who was one of my officers. And she said, the Lord wanted me to tell you that He wants to set you free, but you have to forgive yourself. You still have not forgiven yourself totally, and you have to own up to your own responsibility. And
Right.
I was like, but I wasn't responsible for his death. She said, but you were responsible. And after I was able to come to grips with the fact that, yes, this child was given to me by God, no matter what the circumstances, no matter the fact that I was brainwashed and didn't realize a lot about what was going on until it was too late, he was still my responsibility. And when I was able to own up to that responsibility, then I was set free. And to this day, I, I still feel the freedom of forgiveness, but I see God working in so many ways, and I thank Him so much. His grace and mercy is so wonderful.
So thank you, Yvonne. I know it's never easy to tell that
Yeah.
story, and I thank you for your courage and your bravery. And I think just writing a book about it was probably very hard, but
Yes.
also very healing
Yes.
by writing the
Yes.
book. And
Yes.
so I thank you for coming on the program. And I
Thank
just
you for
want to
having me.
tell you there's not anything or any situation that you find yourself in that God cannot come in and work through other people,
That's
through His
right.
power, through His glory, to just turn that thing around and begin to get you on the walk
That's
of a
right.
new kind of life. We can see it in Yvonne, a whole new way of living.
Yeah.
And isn't that what some of us want? We find ourselves in crazy, awful
That's
situations
right.
that are hurtful and painful, and even we've got ourselves into them.
Yep.
And even if we haven't, God can still redeem that and restore it. And put your faith in Jesus, in the goodness of who He is, the goodness of how He wants to redeem your life and make it all new. And just love Him today.
Yeah.
And be really blessed. Have a great week.